Well, again, I just thank you for joining us today. And if this is your first time, or maybe your first time in a few weeks, we've been in this series called ETHOS, where we've been exploring what are the values that make up a full and meaningful life. And really, what are the values that actually are true to us as individuals, right? Not just what society is telling us that we should value, but what do we truly value? What do we truly care about? So we've been on this journey exploring, what is the texture? What is the essence of this full life? And maybe even beyond that, what potential does that kind of life have an impact on our world? And so in many ways, the values that we're bringing to this conversation, they're subversive to culture, right? Culture doesn't always encourage the kind of things we're talking about. And we have to have the courage to step out on our own, right? To build this life and build this world together. And so over the past 12 weeks, can you believe it? Over the past 12 weeks, we've been having these different conversations, each week bringing a new frame to the fore of really what is a life of values? What does it look like? And again, speaking on the passing of a beloved community member, this week, what was really brought to mind for me was that reminder of how precious this experience, this life is. If you were with us a few weeks ago, we had a guest speaker, Ryan Meeks, who shared his mantra, life is a gift and love is the point. And it speaks to this idea of the preciousness, the gift of this life. And in many ways, when we think about that gift, the highest thing that we can aim for, that we can strive for ourselves, from others, and to give to others, is a life of presence. A life where we are fully here now in the moment. That the life we lived, really, if we're honest with ourselves, is not measured by how many cars you had, by how many vacations you took, by the prestige of your job or title, by the amount of money in your bank account, how fit you were, how many followers how many followers you had on social media, right? No. I think what we really want to evaluate our life by is, was I truly there for myself and for others? And what's interesting about presence, right, our value for today, what's so fascinating about it to me is that it starts in here. It starts in our own hearts, in our own minds, in our own consciousness, because really only you can prevent forest fires. No, only you get to decide if you are living a present life, right? Only you will ever know the full truth of how present you were to your own experience. Of course, others will be able to pick up on it. But at the end of the day, right, there is this almost like a contract that we make with ourselves. And we get to choose, and we're responsible to ourselves of how present we are going to be. And yet, a fully present life within our own experience ends up being a life of presence towards others, right? And even a life of presence towards the world, towards our reality, however you would name it, God, source, the universe, right? It becomes a life where all of the other values that we've been talking about start to naturally arise. We call ourselves a spiritual community, but in many ways, I don't think of spirituality as a value. I think of it as sort of like a field in which all of these values find their depth, find their meaning, right? It's not just a compartment. As Krista Tippett, the host of the On Being podcast, which you may be familiar with, she says, the spiritual life is not a separate compartment of life, but the deepening of presence in every part of it. And naturally, right, it makes us think of coffee and tea, right? It makes you think of tea, of course. No, but in all seriousness, how many of you drink tea or coffee in the morning, right? I think you're lying. There's more of you because I know how many cups of coffee we actually make here at Aldea. So I would say probably most of you. And I was thinking about this today. I was thinking about how, whether it's the tea bag or the coffee beans, right? There's something where before the hot water, right? You have this material with a lot of potential, right? It's very potent. But yet, it's not until the hot water enters into the equation that the fullness of what coffee is meant to be, the fullness of what tea is meant to be, is activated, is brought to life. And in the same way, I think about our life of values, right? Everything that we've talked about thus far, and yet without presence, without the hot water of presence, these values are not fully activated. We don't experience the full depth of what life has to offer. But thankfully, we have presence, which allows us to, right, add hot water to the equation, right? And we get to experience a more fuller experience of everything else we've been talking about. Without presence, even if you have all the right ideas, right, even if you're moving in the right direction, it's as Alan Watts said in that video, it's like you're reaching the end of the song without ever having listened to it. Last week, we had a conversation on the value of vulnerability. And I want to keep going along those lines. I think it's good for us to be vulnerable together. So let's be vulnerable about what it's like to try to be present in our modern world with the technology we have. And I'll just start with myself, okay? I have this problem, and really it's this world that we live in says, okay, you never have to be without a distraction if you don't want to be, okay? So I find myself really engaging in an uninterrupted stream of media sometimes, right? Like, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, right? Maybe you're like me, right? You're watching TV, okay? Media, right? You're distracting yourself. You're enjoying something that's kind of pulling you away from, maybe some difficult feelings you don't want to feel, right? So I'll be watching TV, and then I'll be like, okay, I need to wash the dishes. All right, that's like an actual thing I need to do. So, I put down the remote. But before I go over to the sink, I pick up my phone, right? You're like me, right? You pick up your phone. You're like, well, the walk to the sink, while not super long, it's still a bit of a journey, right? So I would love to just have some other shorter pieces of entertainment, So I walk over to the sink, I'm enjoying some content along the way, right? Finally, I get to the sink. And before I put my phone down, I make sure I have an exciting podcast queued up, right? And I get ready to do the dishes, put my headphones in. Then I'm doing the dishes, and I'm, listen to the podcast. And then finally, I complete the task, right? Good for me. And I think, well, probably should reward myself with some more phone, with some more entertainment. And then, get the phone again. And then I'm like, well, maybe I should actually go do some work or something. And then I go to walk to my computer, and then all along the way, I'm online shopping or something. It's not a joke. Anyone relate somewhat? Okay, thank you. I appreciate the vulnerability, right? No, but in all seriousness, I was being serious. But in all seriousness, we have this day and age we live in, and there's so much of that opportunity. And really the question is, how many days, how many weeks, how many months, how many years of our lives are we giving to things that are actually distracting us from our actual embodied experience of life? The reality is we don't even have to wonder or speculate, because there's this amazing and horrifying app on at least the iPhone, I can't speak for Android, it's called Screen Time. And it tells you exactly how much time you've spent looking at your phone, right? Sometimes for me, it glitches out a little bit, and I go thinking I'm looking at my screen time for the day, but it actually is telling me my screen time for the week, but I didn't realize it, so it's like, you spent 23 hours on social media today, and I'm thinking, maybe, I don't know, possible. But here's the reality. Here's a real statistic. The average American spends 3 to 4.5 hours on their phone every day. The average American picks up their phone, checks their phone 90 to 150 times a day. And it's definitely a larger number for young people. Here's the point, though. Now, maybe more than ever, we have the tools, we have the comforts, we have the conveniences, we have the options that allow us to avoid presence, that allow us to move into some kind of distraction. And again, I don't want to demonize technology because technology also has given us so many things, right? But the question is, maybe are we a people, are we living in a time where we have to work perhaps harder than ever in this area to get back to a place of embodied presence? Now, there is a bit of a silver lining, and it's thin, okay? You really got to squint to see this silver lining. But the silver lining is that I don't think we're alone in this struggle. I don't think we're the only people who've ever lived who have this struggle. In fact, I believe that as long as we've had these modern, evolved human brains, that there's always been this problem with this distraction addiction. And specifically, right, even before technology, we've always had an attachment to the past and the future. Eckhart Tolle, the great spiritual teacher, author, The Power of Now, he says, the more you are focused on time, past and future, the more you miss the now, the most precious thing there is. Here's a reality about the human species. We are creatures of time. We understand ourselves and our place in the world through the concept of linear time. And that includes concepts of the past and the future. But it's very important to remember that the past and the future are mental images. They are ideas. And the reality is that you cannot directly experience the past or the future in the present moment. Yes, you can have a memory. Yes, you can contemplate the future in the present, but you can't actually truly be in the past or the future in the present. We can only experience life one moment at a time. So when we move into the past or we move into the future, it is as though the thinking mind is pulling us out of the full experience of the present. Just like I don't want to demonize technology, I also don't want to demonize the thinking mind. We have a lot to be grateful for with the thinking mind, but it's important to recognize that as a tool, it can also be a burden, right? I'll give you an example, right? Maybe it's 10:40 and you're probably thinking, oh, you're getting hungry. You're like, I'm already thinking about lunch, right? And maybe you're like, what pizza am I going to get at OV Pizza, right? Plug. But, the idea is, whenever you are engaging with some kind of mental image like that, you are moving out of the present moment, ever so slightly. But the reality, what we so often forget, is that life is only in the present. That's the only place that life can ever happen. Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us, life is only available in the present moment, and if you abandon the present moment, you cannot live the moments of your daily life deeply. There's a shallowness that we experience around our daily life when we are not inhabiting the present, right? We begin to lose that depth of experience. And often, here's the reality, often it's not intentional, right? Often we don't even realize it's happening. Things like worry pull us into the future without even realizing it. And we're thinking and we're planning and we're catastrophizing about the future. Things like regret pull us into the past, maybe without us even realizing it. And then sometimes there are experiences that we might consider to be somewhat intentional. And this tends to happen when our present is not what we would prefer, right? Sometimes the moment that we're in kind of sucks. And the past and the future can become an escape. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do I sit with a difficult present moment? What can be uncomfortable about the present is that the reality is we're not in control of it, right? Life is gifting us with moment after moment, right? But the reality is that we don't get to decide what all of these moments hold and what all of these moments entail. So I believe that one of our greatest allies in this pursuit of a present life is non-judgment, right? Not judging what each moment brings. Being willing to let go somewhat of our preferences and realize that there's a freedom waiting for us when we stop trying to change and control every single moment. This is the Eastern or the Buddhist notion of suffering, right? This idea that suffering is not necessarily what's happening, but it's our mental, psychological, spiritual resistance to what's happening. As the author of The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer, says, he does say it, right? I know he says it. He definitely says it. He says, eventually you will see that the real cause of problems is not life itself. It's the commotion the mind makes about life that really causes the problems. Here's the key. Can we say yes to the moment no matter what it brings? Right? Can we say yes to the moment if, say it's something we would desire, something we would prefer, like a beautiful tropical vacation? And can we just as equally say yes to the moment when you're in traffic? Can you say yes to the moment during meditation? And can you equally say yes to the moment when you're, waiting to get off an airplane? Bonus points if there's a crying baby. Here's the real trick, though. The real trick is recognizing that the fundamental difference between these experiences is not out in the world, right? It's not external. It's in here, right? It's our understanding, our experience of it. And this is where presence becomes radical, right? The radical idea of presence is it's saying, I am not going to disengage from my life experience even when things get tough. Perhaps maybe I will even further engage, right? Because we know, and I hope you've experienced this, that from presence, solutions arise, right? While presence is the goal, we know that it's actually in presence that sometimes the answers or sometimes a way forward arises. Now, here's what's really radical about presence. It's okay to not like every moment, right? It's okay to not enjoy every experience you're having. See, we're in a time in history, in society that says if you don't like the moment you're experiencing, right, you can do something else. You can pull out your phone. You can swipe to the next experience, right? You can distract yourself. You can buy something. But the sacred aspect of presence, I believe, is when we choose to be present even when we're experiencing something that we do not prefer. And we choose it anyway, right? We're in a moment and you're thinking, yeah, I didn't choose this. This isn't what I would wanted. And yet you say yes, right? That's presence. And that's where I think the doors really start to open, right? But they're doors inside, right? It's a door in our heart. It's a door in our mind. And so all of this, all we're talking about today so far has been about ourself, our own relationship to presence. And this is vital, right? This provides a foundation for how we experience the rest of the world. But something that's important to realize is that presence is also the way in which we connect to others and we connect to the world around us. Again, name it how you want. Call it God. And so last week we talked about vulnerability. And we said, or at least we reflected on this idea that maybe what we want from others is not for them to fix us, not for them to solve all our problems, but for them to be with us in our experience, for them to share our pain. And I think this is one of the most powerful things that presence teaches us, that the best thing that we can offer to another person, the best gift that we can ever give is to show up, right, with a full heart, with open eyes, awake, right? Not necessarily coming in needing to have all the perfect solutions. Again, when you show up in presence, solutions naturally arise, but let the goal be presence. There is a saying that has really stuck with me. It's been very helpful for me. I've resonated with it, and it's basically some version of 90% of life is showing up. And I find this to be helpful in relationships, in family, even in career, in every aspect of life, because what it's saying is that you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all of the answers. life is simply asking you to be there. And for me, this has been quite a relief, right? It takes the pressure off from needing to have everything figured out. And I'll add a little addendum to this 90% equation, right? That maybe it's not just about showing up, but being sure that we're showing up mind, body, and soul. Because we all know that you can be somewhere and not fully be there, right? But if we can really internalize this idea, I find that it simplifies life so much. Because what it's really saying is that if you can sit with the discomfort and the uncertainty of your own experience, then you can do it for others. And you don't need to be perfect. You just need to offer your presence. I'm in my early 30s, and I've spent a lot of my life, particularly the last decade, right, a lot of my 20s, really just focused on trying to figure out who I was going to be, right? Trying to figure out and plan for and be anxious over and stress about and worry about the future, right? What kind of life am I building? And what's interesting is that spending so much time thinking that way, you start to build a muscle that is always pulling me into the future. And so even in moments of calm, even in moments where things did seem to be coming together just right, even in moments of, beauty and grace and joy and all of that, I had so developed that muscle of moving into the future that I found it difficult to enjoy the present. And I'm fortunate to have a partner, Olivia, someone who is actually helping me to get back into the present. She's always inviting me to be here, right? She can see when I'm going away, and she says, hey, be here in this experience. Because it's my tendency to always be saying, what else? What next? What else must I do? And instead, I think the question really could be, what is this moment right here, right now, inviting me into? That's it. Right? Because what happens, at least this is what happens for me, maybe for you, we can become so focused on the future. And yes, the future is in theory about creating a better present, right? But it's a present that's somewhere else, someone else, right? And so we lose the ability to actually be in the present we're really in. And the problem with that is that even if you were to get there, right? Even if everything that you're planning for comes true, you're not going to be very good at being in the present then, right? Alan Watts, he continues this idea. He says, no valid plans. I promise he says it. He says it. I know he does. No valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now. No valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now. Because even when it comes, right, you're going to be in the next future. So here's the revolutionary idea behind presence. What if we could let go of planning, right? What if we could loosen our grip on anticipating all that is to come and simply practice being here with all of the imperfections of the present moment, being here with all of the ways that the present moment doesn't meet your preferences. And there's maybe a bigger question arising for you, right? You're thinking, how can I let go of anticipating? How can I let go of planning in the world we currently live in, right? With so much upheaval and change, how can I possibly let go of that part of myself? And in many ways, I think, especially over the past couple of years, we've really excelled at reacting and responding and catastrophizing. And maybe we've lost our ability to just be, right? We've lost that aspect of presence. Perhaps it's a missing ingredient. Tara Brach is a meditation teacher. She says the biggest disease of our time is the disconnection from our bodies, from our own hearts, and the medicine is presence. Now, that's quite a statement, right? Given that we face so many problems, right? We face so much. To say the biggest disease is disconnection from the present moment, from our experience, right? That's quite a statement. And yet I find that it's one that we can address, right? There are things that we can't control and things we can. And I believe that we can look at the problem of presence and we could say, we know the medicine, right? We know what will provide healing, right? I can't guarantee that life is going to go according to your preferences. No one can. And I certainly can't guarantee that this world isn't going to keep breaking our hearts. But I am certain of one thing. Maybe if nothing else, I am certain of this. That there is always a choice, always, to inhabit the present moment as fully as possible, right? And my belief is that is always worth it, right? That it is what we should always be striving for. That when we look back on our lives, perhaps on our deathbed, we are not going to be wishing that we spent more time distracting ourselves from our experiences, even the difficult ones, right? Sigmund Freud was noted for saying that one day in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. May we turn away from nothing. May we be present to all with the recognition that it's all part of the beauty and the song and the dance of your life. Ram Dass, one of my favorite teachers, he has this really simple mantra, right? He wrote a book with this name. You probably know it. Be here now, right? And it's so simple. And I find it to be kind of cheeky a little bit because if you really roll it around in your head, be here now, you're kind of thinking, well, where else could I be but here, right? When else could I be but now? What else could I be doing but being? And yet so often, it's not the case, right? So often we are not here. So often we are anywhere but now, right? And so often we are not just being. And I think that's why it's a popular mantra, because it is a tool. It's a way for us to find our way back. I believe the invitation of presence is that it unlocks, it deepens, it accentuates, it fertilizes, it expands, it intensifies, it magnifies, it centers, and it grounds us in this life of values. And so whatever you're doing, whatever your moment is offering you, and however you feel about it, maybe you try to hold on to that question, how could I be more fully present in it? I want to invite you, if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. And however it is that you access that place of presence within you, whatever it might look like, maybe it's noticing your breath, noticing how you feel in this moment, right? Maybe it's trying as best to empty your mind of thought. And whatever that is for you, just practice, just for a moment, what it feels like to return to the present, to come back, to be here now, to be here now. And this is always available. This isn't going anywhere, right? In any moment that you need it, any moment that question arises, can I be more fully present? You can use this tool. You can come back, however it shows up for you, to being here now.